Alright, what's going on, guys? Trev back again, here to bring you another video. This one's going to be doing a video giving my thoughts on a new documentary TV series on Vice. This one's called Who Killed WCW? Alright, dude, so I wanted to go ahead and weigh in on this one. There's been 4 episodes of this documentary series. Don't usually give my thoughts on documentaries, but this one's kind of fun because I was a huge fan in the 90s of the Monday Night Wars in wrestling. So wrestling is not really something I'm really that into these days. I check out a few storylines here and there. I like to see The Rock's return just recently there. Brock Lesnar's always fun to watch some of his matches and stuff, just to see the guys throw each other around and stuff. But for the most part nowadays, don't really watch too much wrestling. But in the 90s, man, late 90s, wrestling was like the biggest thing on television. Monday night there was Nitro, there was Raw, and Raw is War, and it was really, really fun, really exciting time to be a fan of wrestling. Kind of before UFC sort of took a lot of a lot of their audience in that, I think. Wrestling's always going to be big. It's always going to be a thing, right? So, but in the 90s, man, this was so much fun when you had the Monday Night Wars on, particularly like 1997, 1998, 1999, during those few years there, because you had 2 really awesome weekly series, wrestling series. You had, Raw, WWF, WWE, and then in the Monday Night Wars you had WCW with Nitro, and they're kind of new, more sort of like maybe teenage or young adult, geared kind of format. And then WWF at the time kind of changed their format to be a little bit more edgy as well too, and a little bit more for a little bit more of a mature audience than it was in the early 90s, when it was more about kind of over the top comic book type characters like Hulk, but later you had Ultimate Warrior, a lot of the others, Macho Man and everybody, and they ended up in WCW afterwards in the mid to late 90s. You had 83 weeks of WCW beating WWE with or WWF at the time, with Nitro beating in the ratings Raw. So this is one that was like really, really exciting right up to the end. And I remember when I was younger, I was absolutely shocked to hear that WCW was going out of business. I couldn't understand why. I was one who actually preferred WCW versus WWF in the late 90s, because a lot of those stars from the early 90s and 80s in WWF made their way into WCW, and some of them kind of reinvented themselves, changed things up a bit. And you got to see, for example, Hulk Hogan go from the ketchup and mustard, yellow and red, into good guy, eat your vitamin stuff, into NWO, Hollywood Hogan, dude and brother, and he's gonna cheat and do all the different things he's gonna do. He's gonna spray paint you and stuff with black spray paint and everything. And you had Scott Hall, you had Kevin Nash going from WWF into WCW with the NWO angle, and it's awesome. And then you got Sting, and he's dressed up like the Crow, and he's like up there in the rafters staring down, and he like comes down on a thing, and it was pretty exciting. It was a lot of fun. It was probably the best thing on TV at the time. So much fun. How could WCW have gone out of business with all the talent they had, with some really unpredictable storylines, with all this crazy stuff they had going on? How did they go from beating Raw, which is actually, I think Raw now is one of the longest running, maybe the longest running like TV series, because like new episode TV series, with the weekly format. It's just been running forever, and they just keep right on going. It's just the format that can just work like in perpetuity. But how did this happen? How did, first of all, WCW kind of come into that spot get a lot of the best stars in wrestling and really have a new angle and a new look at kind of wrestling to create something that was really entertaining, probably even more entertaining for a while than WWF. And then how did they fizzle out so quickly and go out of business? So I'm excited to see more of the details of what happens with the TV series and what they what they blame for this, the final Nitro and this kind of stuff. I haven't seen every episode just yet, but just to give my thoughts on what actually happened with WCW. So over the years, I've always wondered, right? So I've listened to all the shoot interviews and everything, and it sounds like what happened is there was a competitive environment at that time during the Monday Night Wars to kind of sign and get some of the best talent. And it sounds like Eric Bischoff was basically signing and getting a lot of the best talent in wrestling into WCW. I think they call it like where the big boys play and that kind of stuff. And then Vince actually had to create some new stars in WWF. With Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, and there was Shawn Michaels too, and D-Generation X, Undertaker, and some of the others. But they had to actually kind of catch up because a lot of the best WWF stars from before were now in WCW. Hogan, Macho, a lot of the other guys. And they had Sting and they had Goldberg coming up and some of the other ones they were kind of creating over time there. So it sounds like what really happened to WCW is they kind of set themselves up for failure in that it feels like they probably signed on so many different people and were just writing like blank checks that what ended up happening after they had the 83 weeks and they were doing really great. But once you got into 1999 and 2000, they still had these huge fat cat contracts for a lot of these wrestlers, and a lot of them were kind of older, and wrestlers get hurt anyway all the time anyway, but they were, a lot of them were on the sidelines, a lot of them were hurt a lot, and they had these guaranteed contracts where they were getting paid one way or another, to where in 1999, 2000, there was points where they were losing $7 million a month. And it really comes down to very simply just the talent cost, the amount they signed these contracts for, what they were getting out of each person that they signed, and they probably signed on just way too many people, way more than they needed, didn't control their costs, did all kinds of exciting and crazy things, but to make the show really exciting and everything, get the ratings, but operating costs were way too high because they had so many people signed on, getting really good contracts, really good pay, that once WWF started to kind of turn the tide and take back some of the audience with, for example, they had the Stone Cold versus Shawn Michaels with Mike Tyson as the referee, if you guys remember that WrestleMania. Some of the angles they did, the Stone Cold against Vince McMahon, the boss, right? You had Rock coming up, and they were getting really hot. And once WCW started to kind of lose some of their audience back to WWE, because their costs were so high, they were just burning through money, month by month, and you kind of knew it was going to go out of business at some point, right? But then what ended up happening is there was it was for sale, and you had, I think it was called Fusion, with Bischoff was going to look at buying it or continuing the show, continuing Nitro, continuing WCW, and Vince McMahon, WWF ended up getting it and basically shutting it down, absorbing it, getting the video library, tried a few things with it, and they did have some good things that they did. They brought in, for example, Hulk and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall for a pretty good angle against Stone Cold and The Rock, which was exciting. They did that WrestleMania with Hulk versus The Rock. That was really exciting. Scott Hall versus Stone Cold. They did a few matches, and kind of like Stone Cold, I think, won just about all of them. But it was exciting anyway, and it was cool to see that finally happened, but it was over pretty quick, and they didn't make much of it. They mostly just kind of shut it down and absorbed it. I mean, it's just like, you have some competition in a space, whether it be wrestling or, I don't know, selling hamburgers like McDonald's or something. A competitor comes in, maybe does well for a while. Somebody's going to kind of take it, and one ends up buying the other out, and that's just that's just how it goes. That's just the name of the game, right? So it's a shame because I really enjoyed WCW. I thought it was really fun, especially in like 97, 98, 99. I preferred it for a long time. And it's just unfortunate that, they weren't able to keep their talent costs at a reasonable level. They probably could have done without a lot of the guys they had signed on, because a lot of them, they weren't using them that much anyway, and they were hurt and stuff, right? So also I heard like some of the guys they were building up, like Goldberg, were getting awesome contracts, like really awesome, ridiculous amounts of money. And it was big time at the time. Wrestling was big time at the time. But if you're making a guy, you don't necessarily have to, pay that much when you're the one who's giving him all the people to squash every week. I don't think you need to pay him that much if he just like wins every single match all the time. But that's what ended up happening. So who killed WCW? I mean, I think if you're going to go with one person, you probably have to go with Bischoff. But ultimately, Vince McMahon, too, them getting it and everything and shutting it down afterwards. But if you have to go with one person, probably Bischoff, because he's the one who was getting all these people, bringing them all in and paying them a lot of money. And once business took a little bit of a downturn, they had these guarantees, so they had to be paid no matter what, and guaranteed money. And yeah, that's just, is what it is. Sometimes business is up, sometimes it's down. If you have these guarantees that you have to pay out, regardless of whatever business is, then you're going to be on the hook for those, and your costs can get too high. All of a sudden, your profit and loss, you're in the red, because everybody else is getting paid in the middle. Comes down to it at the bottom line, and you're losing money. You're hemorrhaging money very quickly, and people don't like to lose money. It's going to be shut down soon. If you start going in the red, I mean, it doesn't take long. Shareholders are going to be like, shut it, red button, shut it down. So those are my thoughts on who killed WCW. It's Bischoff. It was him. But then again, he did make it better than it ever was before. However, he was just I think my opinion is he was too generous with those contracts, and ended up, later on, once things slowed down a bit, oh man, it was, they were losing a lot of money quickly. So comments below, who do you think killed WCW? Who's responsible? Who's the guy who did it? What did you think about WCW versus WWF in the 90s, the Monday Night Wars? So much fun, dude. So much fun. I'll tell you a couple before we wrap up here. When I was a kid, one thing that was funny is I loved to see the NWO angle. But for some reason, I never figured out when I was younger. I was like 12 or something, right, when this was happening. I wasn't able to realize that Scott Hall and Razor Ramon were the same person. Somehow I did. Somehow I thought that like Razor Ramon was like this Cuban guy, whatever, and then Scott Hall was like a completely different person. I couldn't figure out they were the same person. But also the heel turn for Hogan, NWO Hogan, Hollywood Hogan, was freaking awesome. I remember being like all emotionally messed up because I loved watching, Hulk when I was a kid with my dad and stuff. They had like Saturday night fights, I think, and stuff like that in Canada we'd watch, and like him against Andre and stuff. And then when the hero became the villain dudes, it was real for me. Okay, it was real. Okay, it was real for me. I did it for the money and stuff. It's like, no, but it was exciting though, right? It was exciting. It was awesome. And then WWF had like, I don't know, Mankind and some of the others and stuff. G-Generation X was fun though. That was really great. But you could always flip back and forth, right? You could change back, like which match is on, this one, that one. Comments below, thumb the video up. That's it for this one, guys. We'll see you guys soon for another Who Killed WCW. Leave your comment below. As Trev saying peace. Later, guys. See you soon.